From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, Chiefs Kingdom. This is Locked On Chiefs, and we have some updates as this Super Bowl week gets kicked off. We told you about their arrival yesterday. We got some visuals of that in the last 24 hours, and we have a lot of things to talk about today, including what this means, who's speaking where, how this week is getting started so they can get ready for this Super Bowl. A bit of sad news coming up here in a bit, but 50 years in the making, it really gets into just how difficult it is to get here. That's what rings home with me today. And it is, people will call it a privilege. I don't call it that because you had to earn your way there. You had to win the AFC conference in order to get to this point. But it does say that being part of a team like this is pretty special. And that part is a privilege to play in the league, to play with a group of people that are so focused to get this job done and be able to take a chance at getting the next job done. Some disturbing news. We finally saw what actually happened with Kareem Hunt. And, you know, before when you found out it wasn't necessarily an arrest, it was a speeding ticket. Okay, that kind of lets it lie. But when you hear what he had to say, it's pretty heartbreaking. And I want to touch on this today because there's a lot of fans that still want him back in Kansas City. And when you look at what we're talking about, being able to play in this game, I think there's a lot going on with Kareem and he needs some help. But this is one of the reasons why it's not something that he should be a part of, because it is a privilege to be this far into this offseason.
It absolutely is a privilege, and Kansas City is taking it very seriously. You watch them deboard the plane or get off the plane yesterday, and it was a not somber necessarily bunch, but it was a very serious bunch, which kind of contrasts the way the 49ers showed up, which who really cares in the end? But it was interesting to me to see one side be so serious and one side be really loose. I don't think that's going to make any difference going into this game. I fully expect Kansas City to be loose. I think that they're just in a business aspect and a business mindset right now. And it goes back actually to the first day of the season where Clark Hunt talked to the team and said, this is a Super Bowl caliber roster. And they are proving him right. He now has the Lamar Hunt trophy in his possession, and they are headed to the Super Bowl in Miami. And it's fantastic for the Chiefs Kingdom and this fan base.
Yeah, and it is a really special season, and that's more on that when we get back from our break. But I just do want to say that for those of you that are still Kareem Hunt fans, I get that. I wish the guy were in better shape mentally. I wish he had taken advantage of his second chance, and I'm not counting anything against him. I just want you guys to understand that when you're trying to make this kind of jump to get and win a Super Bowl, you can't have these kind of distractions. You can't let somebody that's that much of a loose cannon affect the locker room. That's got to be part of it. The culture had to change. They brought Matthew in. They brought Clark in for those reasons. And I hope that Kareem Hunt gets the help that he needs. He clearly needs it. There's some disturbing things on that video. And if you guys don't listen to it, I understand that you might not want to hear it. But I hope that you cross your fingers for Kareem so that he can get himself into a better place. I think that is something that we can all hope for, whether he's part of this organization any longer or not. That said, there are other things going on. So when we get back from this break, we're going to dig into them. Before we get going, just to feed into just how special it is to get to this point in the season, I don't normally plug this. Peter didn't give me anything for this, but if you listen to Peter King's podcast, there's a great episode that just came out when he actually went to work with Andy Reid for a day. Like, Andy picked him up at the airport. At his hotel at like 3:15 in the morning and drug him into Arrowhead. And it gives you an inside scoop at just what the preparation is for Andy Reid and how he goes about it. So I encourage you guys to go check that out. It's the Peter King podcast. Give that a shot. But that feeds into just how many players, coaches, staff put into the process for this. And he's not alone. The first guy to speak at the media tonight, and we're recording this just about as it's about to happen here pretty soon, is Tyrann Mathieu. And are you surprised that he's the first guy up to the podium?
I'm a little surprised, but it's not overly surprised. I would have figured it was going to be Andy Reid, but it looks like they're going with player first, then coach, because the 49ers are doing about the same thing. But for it to be Tyrann Mathieu and not Patrick Mahomes, I think says something too. And I think that's a great thing, honestly. He stepped in and he's filled a major void, because one of the things that we talked about this offseason before Matthew became a Chief was it was going to be almost impossible to fill Eric Berry's shoes. And Matthew has come in and basically done that, both as a player and as a leader. And that's fantastic.
It absolutely is. And I hate to say it this way, but I think the difference shows you the evolution of the league since Eric Berry was drafted, because Eric was a hitter. Eric played near the line of scrimmage as much as Tyrann Mathieu does. Matthew's better in coverage, and I think that's showing off in the effect on the performance of the defense overall, just because of the nature of how much throwing goes on in the league today. And it was recently announced a couple days ago, I wasn't sure, that Eric, quote unquote, voluntarily took a year off. I'm not sure I buy that, but that's how I would spin it if I were him too, because the point is that he intends to return to the league next year, which maybe means that he had an opportunity to sign and chose not to, but maybe there's enough interest there that you see Eric Berry back in the league. I find that a little bit disheartening on a number of levels, but for them to get to the Super Bowl without him and knowing that he may still be able to play, that kind of hurts a little bit. But also it's going to hurt to see him in another uniform if that happens.
Well, it's definitely going to hurt to see him in a different uniform, but I think that was going to be a foregone conclusion. He never said he was done, and he said he was very clear that he wanted to continue to keep playing. The thing that we need to talk about if we're going to really discuss Berry is he going to actually be okay? Because one of the biggest things with him is the Chiefs wanted him to have surgery. He didn't want to have surgery. That's probably the only reason that Tyrann Mathieu is here. If he would have had surgery, I don't know that the Honey Badger's here. And if the Honey Badger's here, Juan Thornhill isn't. So, pick your poison on that one. And you could look and say that almost the same thing when it came to Earl Thomas. If Earl Thomas was here, you're not going to have, you're not going to have Juan Thornhill here. They're not going to go and draft him more than likely. But you start looking at what that's going to mean for Berry going forward. Obviously, I'm hoping that he's going to be healthy. He's going to be able to play, but he didn't get his injury fixed like people said he should. So to me, that's going to be something to watch in the future.
Yeah, I definitely will keep an eye on that too. And I'm sure nobody's going to talk about this week. They have bigger fish to fry right now. This has been a tough couple of days, not only with the Kareem thing, but the players reacted, especially on social Twitter, to the totally crazy out of the blue death of Kobe Bryant. And, normally you would say, why is that going to have such an impact? But you have to remember that the guys that are playing in the league today grew up watching him. For guys my age, it was Jordan. That's where it was. And the comparison to them, we're not even going to have that debate because it's not really something we do on this show. That's a whole other thing. But I do think it's more of an impact in terms of like sports world, not just football world. And it's interesting that so many players had something to say about Kobe, especially when they're trying to get ready for this Super Bowl.
Yeah, and you look at his impact on this generation of football players and his generation, or this generation of really anybody that's in the NFL right now, and really in sports in general. I mean, the sports world in general is just devastated by this loss. I mean, I watched Good Morning Football this morning, and they spent 30, 45 minutes throughout a 3-hour show talking about the death of Kobe. And I'm not saying it's not important. But it was very interesting to me that they went into that kind of depth on it. And I get it. He was a transcendent type player. He was a transcendent type person. And you can get into all maybe the downfalls later, and I don't really want to get into that. But you start looking at what he meant for sports people in general and his ability to connect with just about anyone. There are so many people that have come out and told Kobe stories about how he reached out to him and it meant so much to them. And it is a huge thing. I mean, you're right. You look at a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who grew up watching Kobe. I'm not Mahomes' age. I'm obviously a little older, but I grew up watching Kobe and Shaq. Shaq was my favorite player, so I watched Kobe there. But you still see all these different guys that saw what Kobe did. Another good one is Keenan Allen. Kobe Bryant reached out to Keenan Allen after he got injured a couple years ago and really talked him up out of his injury and got him to be a lot more positive going into what was going to be a very hard time in Keenan Allen's career. It goes all across the league. And there's a lot of people that's this is a huge deal to. Richard Sherman was really good friends with him. So that's a big question mark on the San Francisco sideline.
Yeah, I'm just, as we sit here today, I'm a little bit taken aback about just what an impact a man, almost a generation removed. I mean, the average career in the NFL is so short that you could almost say that it's been a generation since Kobe was on the court, right? I mean, the average year is, what is it, 4 seasons is the average lifespan of an NFL player, and he's retired in what, 16? Yeah. So I mean,
think that's yeah, and he's Frank Clark's idol. I mean, Frank Clark came out and said, he was his idol growing up, and so that's a big thing for Kansas City. I mean, this is a huge loss for the sports world and for just a lot of people. And I get it. I mean, he was a transcendent player. He was somebody that everybody looked up to, or a lot of people looked up to. And like I said, I mean, there are transgressions that whatever, if you want to talk about him, but he was a transcendent player and a transcendent person, and it went way beyond just his impact on the court because of his infectious personality outside.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting for me to see just in the last 24 hours since everybody's gotten to Miami and getting ready for the pinnacle of American sports. You can cry at me all you want about how great the NBA is and how much America embraces it. The Super Bowl is the sporting event of the year, period, around the world, but specifically in America. And to have all this go on just as everybody's getting ready to really start spinning up for that, and the teams get there and all that, I find it a coincidence. And when we get back from this break, we're going to go into who's going to tell us what and what the overall impact of that is, at least to start this week. So there's quite a list of Chiefs players that are going to be speaking. And like I said, we're recording this beforehand. You guys will hear that in the morning, probably as you're hearing this as well. But with those things, knowing that a former teammate's gotten himself deeper into trouble, knowing that the passing of Kobe Bryant, what does that do for I'm looking at the list here. There are a couple of veterans, but there's also younger guys like Chris Jones, like Tyreek Hill, guys that are on, extensively their first contract, right? I know Tyreek got extended, but years wise, there's some youth there. There's a lot of youth on the roster. And normally first night of media at the Super Bowl is an absolute mess, right? And it only gets worse from there. So what is this these particular circumstances outside of the Super Bowl world? What does that do for effect on these players?
I think the biggest thing is you start looking at what it is going to mean for these players and how that affected them. I think you start looking at, okay, well, this is just one more thing that they have to try to put out of their mind so they can get focused on what they're doing. And, Kansas City has had this entire season of this is our goal. This is where we're going to go. And they were told by one of their owners, they were told by their owner that they were a Super Bowl bound team before the season even started. We kind of talked about that in the open. I really think that this is going to be a little bit of a distraction for everybody. And I do think that it's going to be talked about tonight. Really, the more interesting thing to me is what's asked of all these different players that have different things out there. What's asked of Patrick Mahomes? What's asked of Travis Kelce, Frank Clark, Tyreek Hill, those guys that have things out there in their past that they don't necessarily have to talk about in Kansas City. They're going to be asked tonight, and that's going to be a big thing. How is that handled tonight? Obviously, they have had to been coached up for this opportunity and for this situation. So that's going to take into account, but it's still a big question mark.
Yeah, it also that's a very good point, and it also makes me think about who did the Chiefs put out there for media exposure? Who's going to be the least flapped by all of this hubbub, right? Who can deal with the distraction the best, and who, honestly, this is one of those weeks where normally, a locker room's going to try to filter out and keep everything out of there that they don't need. There's absolutely no way to avoid what is said at these media things all week long, right? So you want to put positive vibes out there. You want to put out people who can deflect and handle questions that maybe they don't want to deal with pretty well, right? When you look down the list, Tyron, Andy, Patrick, Travis, Frank, and Tyreek back to back, guys that are going to get some questions they probably don't want to answer, but the team is putting faith in them to answer them or at least deal with the situation.
Absolutely. And then you look at Frank Clark and what he said before the game going up against Derrick Henry. He came out and was very passionate about how Derrick Henry wasn't the best running back in the NFL and it's not hard to tackle him. And you saw what he said, and then they backed it up. And you saw the passion afterwards. And I'm not going to repeat what he said because it's out there and we're kind of a family-friendly show for the most part, so I won't go there. But it was very interesting to me to see how passionate Frank Clark was about that. And I'm really curious to see what he says tonight because it's definitely going to be something that's going to be watched. And then you start talking about all the things that Frank Clark and Tyreek Hill aren't going to want to talk about. And maybe even Patrick Mahomes, as he has some stuff out there as well on from past and Twitter, whether or not he's going to want to talk about it. And you're going to have all these questions that these guys have got to know are going to be coming. How are they going to handle it? And hopefully it doesn't ruin the first night of the Super Bowl preparation for this team.
Yeah, I got to think that at this point, if they put him out there, that it won't, that they feel confident that it won't. Let me ask you real quick, though. Patrick Mahomes, would you call him a big personality or pretty calm?
I'd say he's very calm.
Okay, I would too. Because when you look down the list, Kelsey, Clark, Hill, then you get into, there's Jones as well. He's later down the list in between Schwartz and Colquitt. But then you get into guys that are leaders at their respective positions, but they're more on the quiet side. Sammy Watkins, Anthony Hitchens, Schwartz, and then Colquitt. I think that it's an interesting balance of the big name, the big personality guys, along with guys that are a lot more measured and a lot more quiet leaders rather than the big bolstery ones.
Well, but at the same time, your leaders are who your leaders are. And in reality, I think that's what it really comes down to. Mitchell Schwartz is obviously going to be the leader of the offensive line. Anthony Hitchens is the linebacker leader. People know that. Watkins is a little bit of a surprise to me, but it makes sense because of his time in the league and what he's been able to do for this offense at different times. And I guarantee you, he has been instrumental in helping the young guys get to a point where they can be as productive as they've been for this team this year.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's no mistake. This is a team that has had a heavy contribution from its rookie class, but it's not a mistake that they are not out there speaking for the team. Don't let that bother you in any way. I'm sure there'll be something later in the week. I'm sure McCole Hardman will have something to say. I find him pretty entertaining, and I think the media will really glom on to him. So I think taking it slow with him is probably a good idea so he can continue to concentrate. But it's about weapons, right? There's no Damian Williams out there. It's Mahomes, Hill, Watkins, Kelsey. I think that's telling as well. That's who the media wants to hear from. That's who the team wants to put out there in front. Leadership from that particular group, I think, is paramount in this game, but also in how the team prepares as well.
Absolutely. And you start looking at, the Chiefs have 4 leaders that are on the defensive side of the ball. They have 5 leaders that are on the offensive side of the ball, and then they have Andy Reid and Dustin Colquitt. You look at who the 49ers are running out there, and there is no special teams guy for them. They're it looks like 4 defensive players and 6 offensive players and their coach. So, Colquitt is very respected in this locker room and on this team, obviously, for how long he's been here. And he's a lot of fun, too. So I think that's going to be a fun interview at the very end. And him going after Chris Jones. Yeah, good luck on that one, buddy.
Yeah, I think that'll be entertaining. I find it cool that Schwartz is going to be speaking for the team. Well, Schwartz got into Miami looking like a serious hitman that put the Bahama shirt on, but he's in the slacks, and he's the one dude you don't want to mess with. He was not shooting a lot of candids with the rest of the team and all that kind of stuff. Jeff Schwartz is serious. I'm sorry, I'm sure Jeff is too, but Mitchell's definitely serious, and I kind of like seeing that.
Absolutely, it's a good thing for Kansas City to be able to see the Schwartz that we see on Twitter some. Because honestly, he's really conversational on Twitter, and he likes to talk, and he absolutely loves to talk about food. So you have to wonder if that's going to be brought up at all tonight too.
Yeah, I would expect that quite a bit, to tell you the truth. And there's a difference in the other things that we're going to hear tonight, specifically from the head coaches, and I want to talk about that. But there's a really cool piece that I think we want to share with you guys because it's so unique, and you can get a piece of this Super Bowl run for yourselves.
Yeah, I really can't get over how amazing this football is from Nyco Sports. You start looking at different memorabilia for the Chiefs and what it means for them being in the Super Bowl for the first time in 50 years. And this is a perfect piece to add to your collection. You start looking at this football. It has all the scores from every single game that they've had so far this season. It's fully embossed with all the scores, like I said, and the logos. And it also has a great image of Patrick Mahomes, along with his stats and Chiefs history for this Super Bowl season.
Dan, there's a ton of those, and this is a really unique piece. It's a limited edition. There's only 5,000 of them, and it's $99. Any Chiefs fan deserves to have one of these. So it's pretty simple. All you got to do is call them at 1-800-345-2868, and it'll get automatically upgraded from what is now the AFC champs to what's going to be the Super Bowl champs. See, I was going to take your opportunistic look at the future. And just run
Appreciate that.
So, that's what I'm here for. So, you can also order them online at NICOsports.com. That's NIKCO sports.com. I mentioned the Locked On Chiefs podcast. That always helps us out. And I think you guys are going to be really happy with it. It is a super cool and unique piece, as is this just like generational combination of Andy Reid versus Kyle Shanahan. And I know that football boils down to a lot more than just the head coaches, but that's a really interesting juxtaposition. The youth versus the old age, like a guy retooling what was the West Coast offense's zone scheme back in the day. Like, there's so many pieces here.
There are absolutely so many pieces here, and it's really going to be a lot of fun to see how these two coaches really attack this, and maybe attack's not the right word, but really go into this media session tonight, because there's going to be so many questions that are going to be so different from both sides. You're looking at a situation where Andy Reid's been here before. He knows what it's like, but he didn't win it the first time. Now he's back the second time. He's going to get a lot of questions about that. I guarantee it. But the other question I think he's going to get is, how can this time be different? And finding out and seeing what he says and how he answers that is going to be very interesting to me, just because I'm sure he had a lot of things that he thought about after that loss the last time he played in the Super Bowl, and how he would change things the next time around.
Yeah, I mean, and what a lifetime ago. There's so much that's changed for him personally, for him professionally. Obviously, it's a brand new staff compared to that one, and I think that lets you take the one guy at the head that takes that lesson learned and can apply it and has a whole fresh army behind him to try to overcome that. I think that's a great look ahead at what's going to happen this week. And we have a couple others.
I was just going to say, and then you also look at the fact that he's going into this game with the best player in football, in Patrick Mahomes. He didn't have that the last time around. Donovan McNabb was not the best quarterback in that game. So I think that's going to be an interesting aspect as well. If he really, I don't think he's going to talk about McNabb and down him in that regard, but Andy does have a little bit of a benefit in this game this time around with the best player in the NFL.
Yeah, and I'll take that plus all day long. And, there's a couple of other things that are going to be factors in this game, and we're going to come back with you tomorrow. I know you guys were expecting Matt Derrick. We're still going to try to get that done. Flights and all that kind of thing kind of messed up our schedule today as Matt's trying to get there for media night. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I hope you got the Terez interview that we did yesterday. Terez Paylor of Yahoo Sports was on with us. If you missed it, go back and check that out for sure. You will love to hear what he had to say. And tomorrow we're going to look at some of the insider pieces, some little advantages that might go back and forth. So hope you guys enjoy that. And thanks for listening to us today. We will be back with you tomorrow. Ryan Tracy is the founder of Rogue Analytics and the host of RGR Football on YouTube. Follow him there. Chris Clark is a senior analyst at ChiefsDigest.com, where you can get his work. Rate and review at Apple Podcasts and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform.